The chime from my laptop was innocuous, a cheerful little digital ping that announced an update. It was the sound of convenience, of modern life ticking along smoothly. On any other Tuesday evening, I would have ignored it. But tonight, the house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. A sound that usually soothed me but now seemed to be counting down to something. Leo was away. Again. This time it was a last-minute make-or-break deal in Singapore, a city that seemed to exclusively host financial emergencies that required his personal, multi-day attention. I was curled on our oversized cream sofa, a plush monstrosity he'd picked out, nursing a cup of chamomile tea that had gone lukewarm. The television was off. I'd been scrolling through Pinterest, my mind a soft, hopeful blur of pastel paint swatches and hand-carved wooden mobiles. We had finally, after years of his gentle deflections, started planning the nursery. He'd agreed the timing was finally right, that his firm was stable enough. He'd even feigned excitement, looking over my shoulder at crib designs and murmuring, "Whatever makes you happy, Elena." That's when the chime sounded. A small, unobtrusive notification bloomed in the corner of my screen. "New memories from this week have been added to your shared album." A faint smile touched my lips. The shared cloud account was a relic of our early marriage, a digital shoebox where we'd once dumped vacation photos and pictures of our first tiny apartment. We hadn't used it in years. He must have set up his new phone and inadvertently synced it to the old account, forgetting it existed. I imagined a blurry photo of an airport lounge or a triumphant selfie from a boardroom. I clicked on the notification, a small, pleasant curiosity fluttering in my chest. The album opened. There was only one new item. It wasn't a photo. It was a video file. The thumbnail was jarringly bright, a scene of domestic celebration. My husband, Leo, was there, his handsome face split in a wide, joyous grin. His arm was wrapped possessively around the shoulders of a petite, dark-haired woman I'd never seen before. In front of them stood two children, a girl with solemn eyes who looked about 7, and a little boy, no older than 5, practically vibrating with excitement. They were gathered behind a chocolate cake, a confectionery monster ablaze with 5 cartoon character candles. And behind them, strung across the wall in cheerful, primary-colored letters, was a banner that punched the air from my lungs. "Happy 5th birthday, Leo Jr." The world tilted. Leo Jr. The name echoed in the cavernous new space that had just opened up inside my chest. It felt like a physical blow, a concussive force that left me dizzy and breathless. My hand, slick with a sudden cold sweat, trembled as it moved the cursor over the play button. I had to see, I had to know. I clicked. The sound that filled the silent room was a tinny, distorted version of the Happy Birthday song. But underneath the digital compression, one voice was agonizingly clear, leading the chorus with gusto. It was Leo's voice. The deep, resonant baritone that had whispered 1,000 promises in my ear, the voice that had calmed my fears and celebrated my triumphs, was now singing to his son. His son. After the song, the video continued. The little boy, a perfect miniature of my husband with the same dark curls and the same determined set to his jaw, took a deep breath and blew. The tiny flames vanished in a puff of smoke. Everyone cheered. My husband leaned down, his movements full of an easy, practiced affection, and kissed the top of the boy's head. "That's my champ," he said, his voice thick, with a pride I had only ever heard him use when discussing a successful stock trade. "Make a good wish, buddy." The woman, the boy's mother, reached out and lovingly adjusted the boy's crooked paper party hat. She then looked up at Leo, and the smile she gave him was not the smile of a mistress or a fleeting affair. It was a look of deep, settled intimacy, of shared history and effortless love. It was the look I thought he reserved for me. She said something I couldn't quite hear, and he laughed, a full-throated, carefree sound that I hadn't heard from him in years. He had a life, a whole, secret, parallel life, running concurrently with ours. The business trips to Singapore, Hong Kong, London. The late nights at the office finalizing a deal. The vague but important-sounding excuses that had peppered the last 7 years of our marriage. They weren't lies to cover for work. They were lies to cover for a family. His family. My mind, a frantic librarian, began pulling memories from the shelves. The time he'd come home from a conference in San Diego with a faint scent of chlorine on his skin and sand in the cuffs of his trousers. The unexplained charge on a credit card statement for a Disney store near Anaheim. The way he always insisted on handling all our finances, patting my hand and saying, "Don't worry your pretty little head about it, Lena. It's my job to provide for us." He wasn't providing for us. He was providing for them, using our money, our marital assets, the fruits of the life I had helped him build. I had been the perfect supportive wife, hosting his business dinners, charming his clients, maintaining our beautiful home as a sanctuary from his high-stress world. But I wasn't his sanctuary. I was his corporate headquarters. His other family was his home. I slid off the sofa, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The laptop clattered to the floor, the video still playing on a sickening loop. Happy birthday, Leo Jr. Happy birthday, Leo Jr. I crawled to the cold marble hearth of the fireplace and retched, my body convulsing with a grief so violent it felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. For a long time, I just lay there, the polished stone cold against my cheek, the cheerful, tinny song, a soundtrack to the utter demolition of my world. Every memory we'd shared was now tainted, every loving word a potential lie. The nursery plans on my laptop seemed like a cruel, twisted joke. He hadn't been delaying a family with me because of financial instability. He'd been delaying it because he already had one. But then, slowly, as the waves of pain began to recede, something else rose in their place. It started as a spark in the frozen depths of my shock, a flicker of something hot and sharp. It was rage, a pure, clarifying fury that burned away the tears and solidified my spine. He had done this. He had methodically, deliberately, and cruelly deceived me for nearly a decade. He had played me for a fool. He had seen me as gentle, supportive, and, worst of all, gullible. He had no idea who he had married. Or, more accurately, he had no idea whose daughter he had married. He thought I was just Elena, the art curator. He had forgotten my last name, the name I had so proudly shed for his, Vance. My movements became deliberate, my hands no longer shaking but imbued with a strange, cold purpose. I pushed myself up and retrieved my phone from the sofa cushions. I scrolled through a list of contacts that was a graveyard of a former life, a life before Leo. Past the names of college friends I'd drifted from and gallery owners I no longer worked with, until my thumb stopped on a name I hadn't dialed in 10 years. The one person on this planet who possessed the unique combination of intellect, ruthlessness, and resources to help me. The one person who would take a grim, terrible satisfaction in Leo's downfall. My father. Our story began, as so many do, with the intoxicating belief that I had found something uniquely real. I met Leo Ivanov at a sparsely attended gallery, opening in a drafty converted warehouse. I was 23, fresh out of my master's program in art history, working as a junior curator for a gallery that specialized in emerging, and therefore unprofitable, artists. I was brimming with passion and drowning in student debt. He walked in wearing a suit that cost more than my car, but he didn't carry himself with the usual arrogance of the finance bros who occasionally wandered into such events. He seemed genuinely interested. He asked intelligent questions about the art. His dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He didn't talk about money or markets. He talked about color theory and emotional resonance. He said I had a beautiful mind. I was completely, utterly snowed. He pursued me relentlessly. He sent bouquets of rare flowers to the gallery, took me to restaurants I'd only ever read about, and listened for hours as I waxed poetic about obscure painters. He was building his own private equity firm at the time, and he spun a compelling narrative of himself as a self-made man, a brilliant outsider storming the gates of Wall Street. He'd had a tough upbringing, he said, with no family connections or safety net to fall back on. Every success was his and his alone. To me, a girl who had grown up suffocated by the weight of a powerful family name, his story was intoxicating. He was everything my world was not, raw, hungry, and self-created. After 6 months of this whirlwind romance, the time came for the inevitable: meeting my father. Arthur Vance was not a man who was easily impressed. He was the senior managing partner of Vance, Roth and Abernathy, a law firm that was less a collection of lawyers and more a sovereign power in the world of corporate litigation. I grew up in a sprawling stone manor in Greenwich, Connecticut, a place of quiet lawns, heavy silences, and crushing expectations. My father loved me, I knew, but his love was filtered through the lens of legacy and strategy. He wanted me to be strong, independent, and discerning. When I chose art history over law, he was disappointed but respected my decision. When I chose Leo, he was less understanding. The dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. It took place in my father's cavernous, book-lined study, a room designed to intimidate. Leo, usually so smooth, looked small in the leather wingback chair opposite my father's imposing desk. My father was surgically polite. He didn't raise his voice or use a single insulting word. He simply questioned. "So, Leo," he began, steepling his long fingers, "Elena tells me you're in private equity, a bold field for a young man with no institutional backing." "I've done well, sir," Leo said, his voice a fraction too tight. "I have a good eye for undervalued assets." "Indeed," my father mused, his gaze unwavering. "Your eye is so good, in fact, that public records show your flagship fund is leveraged at a ratio of nearly 8-1. A bold strategy. One might even call it reckless. One big market downturn and you're not just wiped out. You're in debt for a generation." Leo paled. "Those are aggressive positions, but they are calculated risks." "Everything is a calculated risk," my father countered smoothly. "For example, you've calculated that marrying my daughter, of Vance, provides a certain social collateral, a veneer of old money stability that opens doors your current balance sheet cannot." The attack was so direct, so brutal that I gasped, "Dad, that's completely unfair." My father ignored me, his eyes still locked on Leo. "You tell my daughter you have no family. Yet a cursory background check shows a mother and sister living in a modest apartment in Queens. An apartment for which the rent has been paid for the last 3 years. From an LLC that traces back to one of your offshore holding companies. You don't support them publicly, but you hide them away. Why? Are they not part of the self-made man narrative?" Leo was speechless, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. He had been completely dissected, his narrative unraveled with a few calm, factual statements. After he left, his jaw tight with rage, my father turned to me. The strategic coldness was gone, replaced by a deep, weary concern. "He's a hollow man, Elena," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "He is a collection of appetites and ambitions, all wrapped in a charming package. There is no core to him. He is lying to you, and he is lying to himself. He will eventually break your heart and try to break your bank account. Do not marry him." I was 24, incandescently in love, and convinced my father was a cynical snob who couldn't accept anyone who wasn't born into his world. I unleashed a torrent of hurtful, furious accusations. I told him he was jealous of Leo's success. I told him he didn't know the first thing about love. I told him he had to choose. Accept the man I loved or he would lose me. It was a foolish, childish ultimatum, born of pride and naivete. My father's face hardened. He didn't yell, he simply gave a small, sad nod. "The choice is yours, Elena. But my door will always be open. When he breaks you, and he will, you call me. I will always be your father." Those were the last substantive words we'd spoken in a decade. I married Leo at City Hall. We bought a beautiful brownstone in the city. I poured my inheritance from my grandmother into its renovation. And Leo used his financial genius to build our portfolio. Or so I thought. He created a complex financial structure where he controlled everything. The brokerage accounts, the investment properties, the offshore holdings, all were in his name, held within LLCs he alone managed. He convinced me to put the brownstone, our single largest asset and our largest debt, solely in my name, calling it a smart move for liability protection. I was so eager to prove my independence from my father's money, so desperate to believe in my husband that I readily agreed. I had unknowingly collared myself with a golden chain, holding all the risk while he held all the reward, and I had ignored the signs, the 1,000 tiny cuts to my intuition. The frantic, whispered phone calls he'd take in another room, always ending the second I walked in. the credit card bill I'd once seen for a lavish hotel in San Diego during a week he was supposedly in Chicago. When I'd questioned him, he'd laughed it off, saying the card must have been compromised and he'd handle it. He was a master of gaslighting, making me feel foolish and paranoid for even asking. He'd slowly, expertly conditioned me to stop asking questions, to trust his judgment implicitly, to remain a passive, decorative partner in our shared life. Now, sitting on my cold floor, the video's tinny song a death knell in the silent house, I saw it all with horrifying clarity. He hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been running a second, fully funded franchise of his life, and I had been unknowingly footing the bill. The rage returned, a white-hot, purifying fire. He had counted on me to be broken, to be a weeping, helpless victim. He had made a catastrophic miscalculation. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the name. Arthur Vance. Swallowing a decade of stubborn pride felt like swallowing shards of glass, but the need for vengeance was a powerful balm. I pressed the call button. He answered on the second ring as if he'd been sitting by the phone for 10 years, waiting. Elena. Just my name. No surprise, no anger. Just a flat, factual acknowledgement of my existence. The sound of his voice, so calm and familiar, shattered the last of my composure. A ragged sob escaped my lips. Dad, I choked out, the word feeling both alien and like coming home. You were right. You were right about him. You were right about everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence that stretched for an eternity. I was afraid he would say, I told you so, or worse, say nothing at all. But when he spoke, his voice was stripped of all its usual legalistic precision. It was just the voice of a father. I know, sweetheart, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Tell me what happened. And then, tell me what you want me to do to him. And so I did. The story poured out of me, a torrent of betrayal and discovery. The video, the other woman, the 2 children. The name, Leo Jr. The years of financial evasion and condescension. I confessed my own willful blindness, my foolish pride, my desperate need to believe the fairy tale. He listened without interruption, his silence not an absence but a presence, a solid, unshakable foundation beneath my collapsing world. When I finally finished, exhausted and empty, there was another long pause. I could almost hear the formidable gears of his mind shifting from paternal concern to strategic warfare. Good, he said finally, and the single word was colder than a tombstone. Grief is a wasted, anger is a motivator. We'll use it. He thinks he's insulated himself financially. He has no idea what a motivated, well-funded, and deeply pissed-off legal team can do. Be at my office tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. We are not going to file for divorce, Elena. We are going to execute a corporate raid on his life. That was it. The turning point. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a client. A victim, yes, but no longer a passive one. I was the daughter of Arthur Vance, and I was about to become my husband's worst nightmare. I ended the call, my tears gone, my body thrumming with a terrible, exhilarating purpose. Leo was probably sleeping soundly in a hotel room in San Diego, dreaming of his successful deception. He had no idea that back in New York, his life was already over. The demolition had begun. The next morning, I stepped out of a taxi and into the imposing marble lobby of the Vance, Roth, and Abernathy building. The air inside was different, cool, rarefied, and smelling faintly of money and power. It felt like shedding a skin. For 10 years, I had been Mrs. Ivanoff, an art curator living in a brownstone. Today, I was Elena Vance, and I was going to war. My father's executive assistant, Margaret, a woman with kind eyes and a steel-trap mind who had known me since I was a child, greeted me with a look of profound sympathy. He's waiting for you, Elena, she said softly, guiding me not to his personal office, but to the main boardroom on the top floor. The room was intimidating, a cavern of mahogany and black leather, dominated by a vast table that could have seated 30. At the far end, framed by a floor-to-ceiling window offering a godlike view of the city, stood my father. He wasn't alone. With him were a woman in a severe gray suit, whose sharp intelligence was almost a physical presence, and a young man with messy hair who was typing furiously on a laptop that looked like it belonged to the military. "Elena," my father said, his voice all business. He came forward and gave my shoulder a brief, firm squeeze. "This is Catherine Roth, my partner. She's the best forensic accountant in the country. If Leo has a dollar hidden anywhere on this planet, she'll find it. And this is Julian, our head of digital forensics. He finds the ghosts in the machine." Catherine's handshake was like a vice. "Mr. Vance has briefed me," she said, her eyes boring into me. "I need you to understand, what your husband has done is not just infidelity. It's a textbook case of financial fraud and dissipation of marital assets. The law is not on his side, we just need the ammunition." Julian looked up from his screen and gave a curt nod. "I need access," he said, his words clipped and fast. "Any shared accounts, laptops, phones, social media, cloud services. People like him, arrogant, systematic liars, they always get lazy. They always leave a digital trail." I took a deep breath and handed him the login credentials to the shared cloud account. "This is where I found the video," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Julian's fingers flew across his keyboard. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the room was his typing. Then he stopped. "I'm in," he said, a grim smile on his face. Oh, he wasn't just lazy. He was an idiot. He used the same root password for everything. I'm inside his entire digital life. For the next 8 hours, that boardroom became the command center for the systematic dismantling of Leo Ivanov. Julian worked his magic, peeling back the layers of Leo's digital security with terrifying ease. What he found was a sprawling, meticulously documented history of deceit. There were folders within folders protected by laughably simple passwords like his dog's name or my birthday, a particularly cruel touch. He found it all, the scanned birth certificates of Chloe Sarah Ivanov, age 7, and Leo Arthur Ivanov Jr., age 5. He'd even had the gall to use my father's name as a middle name for his secret son. There were school tuition payment receipts, mortgage statements for the San Diego condo purchased through a shell corporation named CSL Properties, Chloe, Sarah, Leo, and years of email correspondence between Leo and Sarah filled with the mundane details of a shared life, arguments about pediatricians, plans for summer vacation, notes about parent-teacher conferences. While Julian built the narrative of his betrayal, Catherine built the map of his financial empire. It was a masterpiece of obfuscation. He had a dozen accounts spread across different banks, a complex portfolio of stocks and cryptocurrencies, and, as my father had suspected all those years ago, a series of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He had designed it to be a fortress, but he had made one fatal, hubristic error. Catherine, in her preliminary search of public documents, had found it. "Years ago," she said, sliding a thick document across the polished table towards me, "when you and Leo purchased your first apartment, he had you sign this. A general durable power of attorney. It's incredibly broad. It grants you, his spouse, the authority to act on his behalf in all financial and legal matters. He probably told you it was a formality for the closing." I remembered I'd been young, in love, and eager to seem agreeable. I'd signed it without a second thought. "Did he ever revoke it?" my father asked, though he already knew the answer. "Never," Catherine confirmed. He was so confident in his control, so certain of Elena's ignorance, that he left a loaded gun on the table and forgot it was there. My father leaned forward, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. It was a look I had seen him give opposing counsel moments before he destroyed them on the stand. "Then our course of action is clear," he said. "A conventional divorce would take years. He would hide assets, drag things out, bury you in legal fees. We are not taking that path. We will use this power of attorney to conduct a full, immediate, and hostile liquidation of every asset he controls. We will drain every account, sell every stock, and empty every vault. And when he is left with nothing, we will take that money and place it somewhere he can never, ever touch it." The plan he outlined was a work of savage genius, a legal and financial maneuver so elegant in its cruelty it was almost beautiful. We would create a new, irrevocable trust, a legal entity that once funded could not be altered or dissolved. The beneficiaries of this trust, my father continued, his eyes gleaming with a cold fire, will be his two children, Chloe and Leo Jr. You, Elena, will be appointed the sole trustee. You alone will control the funds for their exclusive benefit, their health, their education, their well-being. He will be named in the document as their father, but he will be legally barred from accessing or influencing a single penny. We will use his own money to provide for the family he hid from you, and in the process, we will leave him with nothing but the debts. It's not just revenge. It's a perfect, ironic justice. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. For 10 years, I had been a passenger in my own life. Now they were handing me the wheel. The next 48 hours were a blur of focused activity. While Leo was sending me texts from Singapore with pictures of sunsets he'd pulled from the internet, I was sitting in a secure office at my father's firm, methodically executing the financial equivalent of a demolition. Catherine guided me through every step. We started with his primary brokerage account, which held the bulk of his liquid net worth. I took a deep, shaky breath and dialed his private banker, a man I'd met at several Christmas parties. James, hi, it's Elena Ivanov, I said, my voice miraculously steady. I need to authorize a full liquidation of Leo's portfolio and wire the proceeds to a new account. I'm sending over my power of attorney authorization now. There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by some professional hemming and hawing. But the document was undeniable. Within an hour, 7 figures worth of stocks and bonds were converted to cash and transferred. One by one, we worked our way down the list. Savings accounts, money market funds, even his crypto wallet, which Julian managed to access and empty. Each transfer was another brick being pulled from the foundation of his life. The offshore accounts were the final, most difficult piece. But my father's name opened doors and Catherine's expertise kicked them down. Faxes were sent, tense international calls were made. Legal teams in 3 different countries were consulted. In the end, the power of attorney held. By the time Leo's plane was scheduled to land at JFK, his vast hidden empire had been reduced to a single holding account, controlled by me. His net worth was a negative number. We had left him with the mortgage, the car loans, and a looming tax bill that now had no corresponding income to pay for it. The final act was signing the trust documents. My hand was firm as I signed my name again and again. Elena Vance. I was no longer an Ivanov. I was the grantor and trustee of the Ivanov Children's Legacy Trust. With a final keystroke, the entire liquidated fortune, a sum that made me feel dizzy, was transferred into the trust's accounts, where it was legally and permanently firewalled from its source. It now belonged to the children. When I returned to the brownstone, the silence felt different. It was no longer empty. It was mine. I spent the rest of the day in a state of calm, focused activity. I went into his walk-in closet, the one he was so proud of, and began to pack. I folded his handmade Italian suits, his rows of silk ties, his collection of smugly expensive watches. I packed his books, his golf clubs, his entire presence. I stacked the luggage and boxes neatly by the front door, a silent testament to his eviction. Then, I sat down on the sofa, the same spot where my world had ended 2 days prior, and I waited. In my lap was a simple manila folder. Inside was a single 8x10 glossy photo of his other family, printed from the video. Behind it was the single-page summary of the trust, showing its staggering balance. And behind that, a list of all his former accounts, each one now showing a balance of $0. The key turned in the lock at precisely 7:15 p.m. He walked in, wheeling a small suitcase and looking tanned and self-satisfied. He was holding a triangular box of Toblerone, the classic airport gift of a guilty husband. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice booming with false cheer. "You would not believe the week I had, but we closed the deal. We're going to be celebrating for a month." He walked into the living room and his smile faltered when he saw my expressionless face. He then saw the mountain of his luggage by the door. "Whoa," he said, forcing a laugh. "What's all this? Are you surprising me with a vacation? God, I could use one." "I've packed for you, Leo," I said, my voice as calm and cold as the marble hearth. "But you're the only one who's leaving." The manufactured charm evaporated from his face, replaced by a wary confusion. Elena, what's going on? Are you mad about the trip? I told you I couldn't get out of it. I'm sure you couldn't, I replied. After all, a boy's 5th birthday is a very important occasion. You wouldn't want to miss it. Tell me, how is Leo Jr.? I watched the blood drain from his face. It was a physical, visible transformation. The confident, handsome man I married dissolving in real time, replaced by a pale, cornered stranger. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally whispered, the lie flimsy and pathetic. I didn't bother to argue. I reached for the folder, took out the glossy photograph, and slid it across the polished surface of the coffee table. It spun once before coming to a stop directly in front of him. The image of his beaming, happy, secret family, a portrait of his monumental betrayal. He stared at it, a choked, guttural sound catching in his throat. The denial was impossible now. The proof was right there in vivid color. Elena, please, he stammered, his eyes darting around the room as if seeking an escape route. Let me explain. It's a complicated situation. No, it's not, I said, standing up and feeling a strange, vertiginous sense of power. It's the simplest situation in the world. You are a liar and a thief. You have another family. You have been funding that life by embezzling from our marital assets for at least 7 years. It's not complicated, Leo. It's just garden variety evil. Tears, real or fabricated, began to well in his eyes. He fell to his knees in a theatrical gesture of supplication. I love you, Elena. Only you. Sarah. She was a mistake from a long time ago. I was going to tell you, I swear, we can fix this. I'll end it with her. We can go to therapy. The desperation in his voice didn't touch me. It was like watching a bad actor in a play I'd already read. You seem to be under the impression that you have something left to bargain with, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion at all. You don't. I picked up the remaining documents from the folder and dropped them onto the table in front of him. He picked up the top sheet, the trust summary. I watched his eyes scan the page. I saw the moment he recognized his children's names. I saw the moment he processed the 8-figure sum listed as the trust's principal. And I saw the moment his gaze fell on the line that read, Trustee, Elena Vance. The sound he made was inhuman, a strangled gasp of pure, uncomprehending horror. He snatched up the other pages, the litany of his former accounts, each one a monument to his success, now each one reading balance $0. No, he whispered, shaking his head in frantic denial. No, this is fake. This is a joke. It's not possible. The accounts are secure. You can't. The durable power of attorney, Leo, I said, savoring each word. The one you had me sign when we were 24. The one you forgot about because you were so convinced I was your docile, financially illiterate little wife. You handed me the keys to your kingdom 10 years ago. While you were away playing the devoted father, I was busy redecorating. He scrambled for his phone, his fingers fumbling as he tried to open his banking apps. I watched, unmoved, as his face contorted with each new discovery of his own ruin. Logan failed. Account not found. Access denied. The digital walls of his fortress had not only been breached, they had been vaporized. The scream that finally tore out of him was primal, a howl of agony and impotent rage. He hurled his phone against the wall where it shattered. You bitch! He shrieked, his face a grotesque mask of purple fury. You ruined me! That's my money! I earned that money! No, Leo, I said, turning and walking calmly towards the front door. I paused beside his neatly stacked luggage. It was our money, and now it belongs to your children. You should be happy. You've finally done right by them. They are set for life. You, on the other hand, are bankrupt. The mortgage on this house is due on the 1st. The taxman will be calling soon. I believe the term you financial geniuses use is catastrophic liquidity event. I opened the heavy oak door, letting the cool night air into the house. I looked back one last time at the man who had been my husband. He was a heap on the floor, sobbing amidst the wreckage of his own creation, a hollow man finally emptied of everything. Your things are packed, I said, my voice flat and final. Get out of my house. The ensuing legal battle was as brief as it was brutal. Leo, scraping together what little he could borrow from stunned friends, hired a team of aggressive lawyers who came out swinging. They filed motions claiming I had acted under duress, that the power of attorney was fraudulently obtained, that I lacked the mental capacity to execute such complex transactions. My father's legal team treated them like a lion treats a field mouse. They systematically, calmly, and publicly dismembered every one of their arguments in court. They presented the video, the birth certificates, the years of financial statements showing the steady siphon of funds to the San Diego address. The judge, a stern woman with no patience for philandering financiers, all but laughed them out of her courtroom. The trust was declared ironclad. Leo was ordered to pay my legal fees, a laughable command since he was already millions in debt. Within 6 months, his bankruptcy was official. The brownstone, my home, was sold in foreclosure. I had already moved out, taking only my personal belongings and leaving the rest for the bank to seize. His firm, built on the illusion of his financial genius, collapsed when news of his personal and professional ruin became public. He was a pariah. In the midst of the legal chaos, I received a letter from a lawyer representing Sarah. She wanted to meet. My father advised against it, but I needed to see her. I needed to look the other woman in the eye. We met in a neutral, anonymous coffee shop halfway between her new rental apartment and my temporary one. She was smaller in person, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She wasn't a homewrecker. She was another victim. Leo's story to her had been that he was a widower, his first wife having died in a tragic car accident years ago. He had shown her a forged death certificate. He had constructed an entirely different set of lies to cage her in. We didn't cry, we just talked. Two women untangling the sprawling web of deceit spun by one man. I told her about the trust. I explained that she and the children would be secure for life, that they would never have to rely on Leo for anything again. The relief that washed over her face was so profound it was painful to watch. We weren't friends, but we formed an alliance, a quiet partnership dedicated to protecting the two innocent children caught in the middle. As trustee, I set up a generous monthly stipend for their living expenses and funded their education accounts. I ensured they would have every advantage, all financed by the man who had tried to keep them a secret. With the dust settled, my old life was gone, but a new one began to emerge. My relationship with my father was reborn. The years of silence were replaced with a comfortable, easy respect. We didn't dwell on the past, we looked to the future. With his encouragement and a portion of my own untouched inheritance from my grandparents, I started my own art advisory firm. The skills I'd once used to curate galleries, I now used to build valuable collections for discerning clients. I discovered I had a head for business, a knack for negotiation I never knew I possessed. I had my father's strategic mind, tempered by my own passion for art. My firm thrived. The last I heard of Leo, he was living in a dreary suburb in Florida, selling timeshares. A friend of a friend had seen him. He'd aged 20 years, grown paunchy and gray. A man hollowed out by his own greed and deceit. He had lost his fortune, his career, his wife, his mistress, and, in a way, his children, who were now being raised and provided for by the woman he had betrayed. Tonight, I am standing on the terrace of my new penthouse apartment, a place I chose and paid for myself. The city spreads out before me, a glittering tapestry of lights. My father is here, visiting for dinner. We clink our wine glasses, the sound a clear, bright chime in the evening air. For a moment, I think back to that other chime, the laptop notification that started it all. It felt like the end of the world then. But it wasn't. It was a demolition. And from the rubble, I learned how to build. I am not a victim. I am not a wife. I am Elena Vance, and I am the architect of my own life.